Welcome to the Therapist Burnout Podcast, episode 96. Hey, therapist. Today I'm talking with you a little bit about asshole stories that we tell ourselves. So maybe I should have said the explicit filters on, so I might say asshole a number of times. If you haven't read the No Asshole Rule, which is building a civilized workplace and surviving one that isn't, I love that book. I have no other reason to recommend it other than it's a great book. It was actually given to me by my mother when I was struggling on internship and felt like I may not complete my predoctoral internship because I was in a toxic workplace situation where I was really feeling targeted. So I know that we're talking today on asshole stories that we say to ourselves, but sometimes there's a legitimate asshole that is in your environment that you need this book for. And this was written by a Stanford University professor, and it's very highly researched, and it was part of a Harvard Business Review article that really shows you how to deal with assholes. So if you're in a situation where you're dealing with one, then get this book. This episode, however, is more on those stories that we tell ourselves, and I think these are the top 5 asshole stories that therapists tell themselves. So if you're here for that, then listen up. So before I get to the top 5, I just want to talk about just some realizations that I'm having this year. I think as the year is winding down, I'm going to be doing this is 96, 97, one. So I have 5 more episodes left for this year that I am going to put out. And then I'm going to be off for a few weeks to rest and recharge and take a full break and hopefully get a little bit ahead of my podcast schedule in there. I think I'll be back probably that first week in January. But I can tell you guys all that stuff because I don't even have to tell you that right now, right? I think for anyone who is a high achiever, many of you that listen to this podcasts, by nature of getting a degree, an advanced degree, you are a high achiever because you have achieved a license, you went to school for a very long time. I think we get into these modes of getting to the next thing, achieving the next thing. I think when I have taken all these different inventories, I fall into these types of personality profiles. And then I'm totally an overthinker. So it's like I achieve, I get to the mark, and then I'm just questioning everything about my life. I have existential distress all the time about what does this mean? I'm like, "Oh my gosh, my kids are, older," or my brain sometimes exhausts me. I tell my partner all the time, "Can we trade?" 'Cause he's a psychologist as well, and when I started this podcast, I probably have said this a bunch of times on the podcast, and I told him I was going to do a podcast on burnout for therapists. He was like, "Is there really enough to talk about on a podcast about therapist burnout specifically?" And I was like, "Oh, yes, there is." There is definitely plenty to talk about. And so that's what I've been doing for 2 years. So I didn't even celebrate like 2 years that I've been podcasting on therapist burnout, but it has been 2 years. And really, I started recording episodes when I was closing my practice. So I started recording those episodes because I remember some of the episodes back, I was saying, like, I am seeing my last few clients. I am closing this practice. So if you listen back to my early cringe episodes, you will hear some of that. It's not cringe. I just, I really listened back to one of them recently and I was like, I just love her. I love her. She is trying her little heart out and she is striving to get through this damn burnout. And I love her. I do. I do. And I'm so glad that I can see, like, I can have empathy for my past self now. And I say that because when I talk to therapists that are just so depleted and just don't know what to do, feel like they're in these places, I see you because I was you. And my heart goes out to you. And I'm just like, please just be kind to yourself. And that's why we're talking about asshole stories today. So, partway through this year, I think probably because I work as a school psychologist, people tell me they want me to talk about that more, by the way. They're like, "What do you do? Like, what is it like?" Because is that a career that I could do? I do like many parts of working as a school psychologist. I do. So, how I got into that is just by working my network. Honestly, my partner works in school psychology, knew someone who worked at the district that I work in now, and it happened to be that I was able to get an interview and they really needed somebody, and I had never worked in a school before, and I got an interview and I got the job, a contract. And that was my way kind of out of private practice. I was like, "Oh, okay, this replaces that income. Let's go. We're done. We're good." So that was that story, and I've been doing that ever since, and this podcast and doing consulting, which financially, like the consulting work I do for Therapist Burnout podcast is a very small amount of my income. And partly is that of like, I've been trying to work on a course in the background, but I got really busy in the fall again. So that course has been on the back burner. And yeah, so I'm like, what do I do with this podcast? And I'm still here because because I am, because I still feel like there's part of me that feels like there's work to be done. So I still continue. I'm on this path with you. So through this year, I had this moment where I've been like I've been ramping up to build this course. I did a whole bunch of consult calls with therapists to figure out like what do therapists really need? And what I know they need is burnout recovery. Will they pay for that? No. It's just like I have so I wrote my dissertation on compassion fatigue, in 20 when did I graduate from that? 2011-ish? Yeah. So 2011, like 15, 16 years ago, and I would go to the trauma trainings and I would go to all the talks on compassion fatigue. And going in the Wayback Machine, I became interested in this topic because I first became burned out as a foster care caseworker. And I just saw the utter depletion that happened in casework. And so there's well documented research that one of the most depleting careers is being a social worker in child welfare. And so seeing that, I became more interested in my own experience and also the experience of my colleagues. And I've always been interested in supporting my fellow colleagues and fellow therapists. I've run peer supervision groups. I've just found my way into these places. And going to the trauma trainings, I was like going to the burnout talks and the compassion fatigue talks because it was my dissertation topic. And it was like tumbleweeds, y'all. Nobody's in those talks. Everyone is in the skill-based, the hot little skill research back in the time EMDR was just becoming hot, like 15, 16 years ago. And it still had this like flair of voodoo, like EMDR is voodoo. I think very much now EMDR is well accepted, even though the APA recently like dropped it down a notch. So anywho, I just went down a total squirrel brain moment, but I think this part of like my brain has been looking at different things that have come out on LinkedIn, and I've also been looking at different research on these things. I also saw an interesting article that was on IFS, which does not have robust research. Especially for PTSD. I think there's one random controlled trial on arthritis? Maybe I'm wrong. I should look it up to see what it is because this is a podcast and it's a publicly distributed thing. So let me look it up. RCT is on IFS. I think they just have one. It was rheumatoid arthritis that they have one randomized controlled trial, whereas other modalities have many, right? And so I think that's important to think about when all these hot trainings are coming out. I just because I was talking about trainings and how nobody attends the compassion fatigue training, and how and that's my personality. So part of it is like seeing myself for who I am. Like I go deep into things. So podcasting, I had a phase when when my kids were little that I was baby wearing. And I was, like, acquiring all these baby wraps and all these other things. I had a quilting phase where I still have, like, a bunch of fabric and things that I make. I trained to be a fitness instructor. I still teach fitness classes, so I did a deep dive there. So I have all these fitness certifications, and that's just who I am, is I like to dive deep into things, but I noticed this huge shift, and that's what I've been doing all my life, and part of me acquiring skills and certifications and, like, I don't know enough even with a doctoral degree. I don't have a PhD from Stanford. Maybe then I would know enough. It never stops, right? It never stops. Like, you can never know enough. I can never know enough. And what I came to just feeling is like, I just want a softer life. And I think that's what a lot of the people I talk with want too. They just don't want to have to do as much. And also, I had this moment with my son where, he was kind of saying, and my workload had been high in the spring and in the fall. I had some pressure with my school psych work. Like, you're always on the computer. And that was hard. That was hard feedback to get from my son. He's also in a place where he's obsessed with his 12-year-old brother who just has access to an iPad now and a laptop with school, so he's also noting, like, I don't have a screen and everybody else has a screen in the house, and that's not fair, and so he's been on my 9-year-old has been on a campaign for a screen, which I'm not giving into. So there's part of that too, of, like, I don't have a screen and you're always on your screen, and anyway, so that's a whole 'nother thing with being 9 and your brother is in middle school, so but I know that also there is something there, right? There is something about the pace and the pressure and, like, just how life can get frantic even with our best intentions. Like, we might have the reset, we might, change our work and still things get frantic. And I think part of, like, putting changes in place for therapists and for people who are in caring professions is these asshole stories that you tell yourself. So here's my big long introduction that's squirrely that we're gonna get there, and we got there. The first one is I should be able to handle this. And I really think this is the therapist equivalent of self-gaslighting. So we're telling ourselves we're drowning in, like, the amount of clients that we need to see. For me, at times with my evaluation list, I I should be able to do these reports in the amount of time I need to do it, yet I can't. Yet I underestimate the amount of time that I need to do these things. And I think we see this as a personal failing, that we can't do it, or we should be tougher, more resilient, or more capable, or if we have the best productivity system, then we're going to figure this out. And I think the trap here is that it convinces therapists that they're defective when they're actually depleted, and they're trying to work within a system that's a setup for them to fail. And I think that's really starts from, like, the caseloads that we receive, on internship or when we start our private practice. Part of that is just the money, we need to make a certain amount of money. And that means that that's going to inch our caseload up based on how much value or what we can receive from that clinical hour. I think the second one is if I leave, I've failed. And I think this one is kind of entrenched in our identities as a therapist. I think for a long time after I left my role as a therapist, I was saying, I don't trust myself. I think there was a lot of grief and a lot of clinging to the shame of not being able to figure it out. And I think it's harmful because if we need to change, if we need to do something different, then again, we don't see it as like something that a lot of people do. A lot of people change careers. Research shows that most people will change their careers at least once in their lifetime. the average person tends to go through 3 to 7 careers before they retire, and the number may be more like 5 to 7 for the current upcoming generations of workers. So, a high number, right? A high number of people are considering a career change, so we know that it's common. A lot of people do not stay in the same career or the same field. The next one is I don't have any other skills. I guess this is one of my pet peeves, like I have no other skills other than being a therapist. Like, who could ever want to hire me? What can I even do? And I fell into this trap as well. I think we can tell ourselves a story that we're a huge imposter. Like, I've been doing this one thing for a long time. How could I do something again? And it showed up for me when I moved to doing school psychology. I hadn't done a lot of testing in about 8 or 9 years. And what I realized is I completed a postdoc in neuropsychology. I, I had a lot of expertise to bring to that role. So I think really leaning into your experiences and noting just how much expertise you can bring to other situations. The fourth one is no one will hire me in this market. I, at the time of this recording in 2025, it is a difficult market. I remember when I first started this podcast a couple years ago, it was a hot market. And I was like, y'all, the market is hot. People are charging like $250 for a session. Like, it's weird. Different times, definitely different times right now. And of course, I think a lot of people are feeling scared or feeling like there's no way I could change right now because there's no jobs available. But I certainly know there are jobs available. And I think thinking of working your network has always been the way that I've recommended people to do this. And also, I think people, which I'll get into the next point, that your next role isn't a career shift typically. It is a bridge or it's an on ramp. So I think sometimes we need that, I'll say off ramp or on ramp. The off ramp job is it just a job. Like maybe you have to work doing gig work. Maybe you're just like, I cannot do therapy work anymore. And I'm going to take a legitimate break, perhaps do something completely different and take something, yes, at a much reduced fee for yourself, for your work. But that's for a time until you kind of make some moves to be able to make the shift that you want to make. I think the the problem with having like the binary thinking of no one will hire me in this market is that if you're going into a job search that way or you're just randomly spamming, people on LinkedIn applying to jobs without even knowing anybody there, you're likely not going to get an interview. Something that's not going to happen based on what we're seeing in today's market because of AI, because of people just having AI help them speed up that application process. So it really does take doing the networking, talking to people that trying to even make a warm outreach on LinkedIn, perhaps to that person to say, like, hey, I notice you have this open position and I'm very interested. That's a little warmer than just a application you fill up. Number five, I need a perfect plan before I make a move. I think this is a paralysis story. I have seen therapists do this so many times. They're wanting to research completely a career path, a new career change, or go back to school, do a coach certification, because that's going to be the thing. I don't recommend that. I think you need to dabble in some different things. If you want to do coaching, I I can't tell you can do anything you want. But I think because it's an industry that's not regulated and I think therapists can really doubt themselves in becoming a coach and be really worried about muddying the clinical waters there, I think it can get messy very quickly. So if you're doing it, I'd rather you have like a structure where you're getting coaching clients from somebody and maybe try it out a little bit before you make a complete pivot into that. It can be a path for people. It's just not one that I've seen people immediately do if they're burned out or if they need a career shift or a job change. So I think Doing some research, yes, is helpful. Maybe knowing some general ideas of things that you could do can be really helpful, but needing to know your next 5-year plan is not necessary, nor should it be, because you might go into this next thing that you have your idea to do. Maybe it's HR, maybe it's air traffic control. I've heard of a therapist doing that, air traffic control. Yes. Maybe it's, going back to school, getting your PhD in a different field. So I think needing to have a perfect plan isn't necessary. What is necessary is walking a path. If it doesn't work out, if you don't like it, you can go back in the little traffic circle that I have, like a traffic circle metaphor of different exits we can go on. We might get back in and then find another path that's the one we want to walk on longer. And I just think it delays why it's harmful is it delays your change. And it makes you feel like, okay, well, in my mind, I can't make this career make sense, so I'm just gonna stop. I think the reality underneath all of these is that if you are leaving anything, and it could just be I'm leaving insurance or I'm leaving a low-paid agency job. That's the move. I wanna stay in my work as a therapist. So this applies to any work situation. It does. I know I talk about leaving therapy, but I know a lot of therapists, they wanna stay or they can't leave yet. So I think knowing that if your choice is to leave, you didn't fail. If your choice is to leave your agency job, you're not failing because you couldn't hack it. You aren't skillless outside of your work as a therapist. So perhaps your skills, they can and will transfer if you want to do something different or therapy adjacent, something where you can do maybe even some therapy, doing some other roles. You aren't behind for not having your life fully mapped out. I think in a lot of contexts, many of us feel like we are like Earth school is hard. Elizabeth Gilbert says this all the time. And, I've judged myself many times for having a burnout podcast and feeling like I don't have this figured out. Who am I to talk about burnout when I don't have it figured out myself? And I love the way she talks about these things that it's okay that I don't have it figured out because earth school is hard, because doing this work is hard. And it's about walking paths, figuring out this wasn't the way that I wanted to go, walking back and really being kinder to yourself. I started like talking about those early podcasts I had and thinking about, I really like her. I really love what she was doing there. And I see how I needed to do that to get where I am today and that I still haven't arrived, and that's fine. That's fine. I may never arrive, and that's fine too. I've been pivoting since 2021. Y'all. I'm not done. And I do find myself getting to places where I can find quieter places, more aligned places, and in many ways, the roles I have in school psych are very aligned. In other ways, they're not. And I'm still figuring that piece out with this podcast. I think my hope with the podcast is it would be my career. And now I'm not sure. Like maybe it will be. Maybe I'm seeing it more as something that I do, a way to express myself, a way to help people. And if it provides meaningful income to me in the future, that would be fantastic. But also, it's isolating work to sit in a room by myself and talk to a screen. It's what I'm doing. I'm literally talking to a screen. And many times I hear from you on email or I get posts, when I post on LinkedIn, I get responses back and that's great, but it's a parasocial environment. So I don't really know personally any of the people on LinkedIn. I have a couple of connections that I have gotten to know a little bit more deeply, but there's no one that's really close to me who knows me and knows like how hard this work is to do unless they're a podcaster themselves and understand what it's like to do this work. So I know that maybe I don't even want it to be something full time. Maybe it's something that stays smaller because I don't have the infrastructure to support this work alone because it's just me doing this. What I hope you leave with is that something I've been saying to myself is that small pivots count, that the small moves that I make count, that I I'm not too late. There's hope for me, there's hope for you. You can figure this out. And that's why I hope to, have more community in 2026 with the people that listen to this podcast because I want that for myself and for you. Because I know how people write in to me and they tell me how alone they feel. And so that's what I'd like to leave you with is just hopefully being kinder to yourself. So if you have one of these scripts, how can you see yourself with more gentleness, with more kindness? And even right now, just maybe taking a deep breath for a moment and breathing into that, breathing into how you can see yourself more tenderly and the way you're talking to yourself about the things that you wish were different that aren't. All right, my friends, I will talk with you next week on I've been wanting to do an episode again on clinical grief. I know, grief is a theme I often talk around the holidays. It can be difficult for us and our clients oftentimes. I think when we see trainings on grief, it's often on the client's perspective or our, for me, it's students now where I work are younger people. But thinking about what can you do for yourself when you might be experiencing grief clinically and perhaps your own grief and how to hold that through the holiday season. So, as I'm thinking of 2026, I am thinking of building a small, intimate circle. I'm calling it the soft pivot circle. And it's an experiment I'm going to try of for therapists who are lost, who feel like, yeah, I don't know which way to go here, but what I'm doing isn't sustainable, whether it be a job, an agency, or for a tech company, or in your private practice, it's not working for you. And that's what I'm hoping to bring something to those folks that need something else, but don't know what the next step is. And I don't have any cherished outcomes for you for that. So if it's leaving your private practice, if it's leaving your agency, if it's staying in that job, maybe it's pivoting. There are multiple trajectories. And I know many of you have the question of like, what else can I do? And so gently and kindly, I want to offer that it is the wrong question. I think it's figuring out first, why do I want to go? How do I create the capacity to go or to change? How do I build a structure of support around myself, both psychically, emotionally, spiritually, if that's your orientation, to be able to make more soft pivots, to make these micro turns? I think of like, I don't know if it's a quote or something, but if we think of like a huge ship, you can't just turn on a dime in something that's so big. Change happens in those incremental shifts and turns and pivots, and they all count and they all matter. And you can do that. So that's what we'd be doing. We'd be talking about how to regulate our nervous system through all this. So I'm sneaking in burnout recovery, but I'm not calling it burnout recovery because y'all don't like that for some reason. And then like the tangible stuff, like getting feedback on like, I have this job interview and this is what they're offering. Should I take it? And getting real feedback from not just me, because I'm one freaking person, right? Okay, ask your support people, ask your partner, ask your family, ask, your colleagues. Ask your community here of other therapists what they think about it too. And getting some of that feedback. Maybe it's on how do I terminate with clients who I'm really crusty with? Getting feedback on that. It can be a lot of different things for therapists, but I think making those incremental shifts and seeing the progress towards that is important. Okay, so that's what we'll do. So if you want to get on the wait list for the soft pivot circle, which will start in 2026, get on my list. And I will let you know I'm going to be opening that up next month. Okay, have a good one.